My family broke into my apartment to move my unemployed sister in without asking me because they thought I'd just accept it since I lived in a camper during the pandemic, but when I came home and found them there I called the cops and got them arrested for breaking and entering. My younger sister Laura, 28F, just attempted something so bizarre that I, 32M, still can't believe it happened. Before I get into what went down last week, I need to explain the history between us because it makes what she did make more sense. Laura and I grew up in what looked like a normal family from the outside. Our parents ran a small accounting firm together and were well respected in our community. But inside our house, things were different. Laura was born when I was 4, and from the moment she arrived, the dynamic shifted. I went from being the center of attention to being background noise. When we were kids, Laura got piano lessons, art classes, and a new bike every other year. I got hand-me-downs from cousins and was told to be grateful. When she wanted to go to private school in 8th grade, they scraped together the tuition. When I asked about applying to a summer engineering program in high school, my dad said we couldn't afford extras. Laura went to Paris for a class trip her junior year. I worked at a grocery store to save for a used car. The pattern continued into adulthood. Laura went to a private university where our parents paid her full tuition and rent. I went to community college and worked night shifts at a warehouse to pay my way. She graduated with a degree in marketing and moved back home. That was 6 years ago. She still lives with our parents rent-free and has never held a job for more than 4 months. She always has an excuse ready. The boss was mean. The commute was too long. The work was beneath her skill level. Our mother always backed her up and said Laura was still figuring things out. 3 years ago, Laura started dating Adam, 29M. He moved into our parents' house after 6 months. They got married in a ceremony that cost more than my entire college education. Adam works in IT support and makes decent money, but Laura still refuses to work. They talked about getting their own place but never actually did anything about it. Our parents' house is a modest 3-bedroom ranch, and with 4 adults living there, things got cramped. Laura complained constantly about not having space, but she never took any actual steps to change the situation. I moved out when I was 19. I rented a room in a house with 3 other guys and worked 2 jobs to cover my share. My parents didn't offer to help, and I didn't ask. We saw each other on major holidays and that was fine with me. The less time I spent around Laura's constant complaints and our parents' excuses for her, the better. In March 2020, everything fell apart for me. The restaurant where I worked as a line cook shut down permanently. 2 weeks later, the warehouse let me go because orders had dried up. My roommate lost his job around the same time. We couldn't cover rent on our 2-bedroom apartment. He moved back to his hometown. I sold most of my furniture and anything else I could part with. I had my old Chevy Silverado that I'd bought used years earlier, and I found someone selling a slide-in camper shell for $800. It needed some work but was structurally sound. I installed it myself in a grocery store parking lot. I called my parents and asked if I could park the camper in their driveway temporarily while I looked for work and saved up for a new place. My dad said the driveway was full with their cars and Laura's car and Adam's truck. My mom said they didn't have room for me. When I pointed out I'd just be in the driveway in a camper, not in their house, my dad said I could stay if I paid them $1,200 a month. I was on unemployment and trying to save every dollar I could. I told them I couldn't afford that. My dad said in that case, I should figure something else out. He also mentioned that the camper would look bad in front of their house. Laura came to the door and laughed when she saw the camper. She asked if I was really going to live in that thing like a homeless person. Adam came out too and took pictures on his phone. He said something about this being too good not to share. I drove away and spent that first night in a mall parking lot. I barely slept because I kept hearing noises outside and thinking someone would break in or tow my truck. Over the next few weeks, I figured out the routine. Public library parking lots were usually okay during the day. Some grocery stores didn't mind if you stayed overnight in the far corner of the lot. I got told to move more times than I can count. Someone claimed they were with the neighborhood association and threatened to call the police even though I was parked on a public street in a commercial area. I moved to avoid trouble. I had a small battery pack that powered a light and could charge my phone, but it only lasted so long. I started carrying a long extension cord and would plug into exterior outlets on buildings at night when no one was around. I used public restrooms and Planet Fitness for showers. I spent my days applying for jobs, reading books from the library, and watching old DVDs on a portable player I'd owned since high school. After 3 months, I got hired at a small manufacturing plant in a town about 40 minutes from where I'd been parking. The job was entry-level machine operation, but it was full-time with benefits. My new boss was a guy named Tom who owned the business with his brother. The plant had an old parking area in the back that they didn't use anymore. Tom noticed I was showing up an hour before my shift and staying late most days. He asked where I was living, and I told him about the camper. He said I could park it permanently in the back lot if I wanted. He let me run a power line from the building and even gave me access to a utility sink in the bathroom. In exchange, I agreed to work a few hours on Sundays doing maintenance tasks. It was better than anything I'd had in months. I became friends with the night security guy, Ramon, and we'd sometimes eat dinner together when our shifts overlapped. I worked every hour of overtime they'd offer. I learned how to operate different machines and took on extra responsibilities. After a year, Tom promoted me to shift lead. By early this year, I got promoted again to production supervisor. My salary was better than what I'd made before the pandemic at both my old jobs combined. I started seriously saving. I kept living in the camper because I didn't have rent or utilities. I put away almost 60% of my paycheck. By June, I had enough for a down payment. I found a small 2-bedroom apartment in an older building near work. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I signed the lease and moved in mid-July. I didn't tell my family right away. We weren't in regular contact anyway. I updated my driver's license with my new address and spent August slowly buying furniture and getting settled. I kept things minimal because I'd gotten used to living with less. In early September, my Aunt Judith called me. She's my mom's younger sister and one of the few relatives I stayed in touch with over the years. She said she'd heard through the family that I'd gotten a new place and wanted to congratulate me. I thanked her and asked how she'd heard. She said Laura had posted something on Facebook about me getting an apartment and how I was doing well now. I thought it was strange since Laura and I didn't talk, but I didn't think much of it. A week later, my cousin Jennifer sent me a message asking for my new address because she wanted to send a housewarming gift. I gave it to her and thanked her. She mentioned she'd seen Laura's posts about my new place and was glad things had turned around for me. I got curious and checked Facebook for the first time in months. Laura had made several posts about me over the past few weeks. She'd written about how her brother had gone through hard times but had persevered and now had a nice apartment. She made it sound like she'd been supportive the whole time. Several relatives had commented congratulating her for being a good sister. I didn't correct the record publicly, but I found it weird. On a Tuesday morning 2 weeks ago, I left for work at my usual time around 6:30. I had a normal shift and stayed late to train a new operator on one of the machines. I got back to my apartment around 7 that evening. When I pulled into the parking lot, I saw Adam's truck parked in a visitor spot near the building entrance. I walked up to my door and found it propped open with a doorstop. I could hear voices inside. I walked in and found Laura in my living room directing Adam and our dad on where to put boxes. There were bags and bins stacked along the wall. My bedroom door was open and I could see someone had put sheets on the bed in there. Laura was standing in the middle of the room with her phone out, taking pictures. When she saw me, she smiled and said they'd been waiting for me to get home. She said they'd wanted to surprise me. I asked what was happening. Laura said she and Adam were moving in. She said the apartment had 2 bedrooms and I was only using one, so it made perfect sense for them to take the other room. She said they'd pay me rent, but when I asked how much, she said $300 a month. My rent was $1,800 for the apartment. I told her that wasn't happening and they needed to leave. Laura's expression changed immediately. She said I was being unreasonable. She said family helped each other out and that I'd lived in my camper for over a year to save money, so clearly I didn't care about luxury. She said they'd been cramped at our parents' house and this was my chance to do something good for her. Adam said they'd already started moving their stuff in and unpacking, so it made sense to just let them stay. I asked how they'd gotten into my apartment in the first place. My dad said he still had connections with local locksmiths from his business and had called in a favor to get someone to come out that afternoon. I looked at the door and saw they'd changed the lock. The old lock mechanism was sitting on a box nearby with tool marks on it. I told them they had broken into my apartment and changed the locks without my permission. I told them to start packing everything back up and get out immediately. Laura started crying. She said she couldn't believe I was being so cruel when she'd been telling everyone how proud she was of me. Our mom came out of the hallway bathroom at that point. I hadn't even realized she was there. She said I needed to calm down and think about family. She said Laura and Adam needed a place to stay and I had room, so this was the obvious solution. I took out my phone and called the non-emergency police line. Laura stopped crying immediately and asked what I was doing. I said I was reporting a break-in. Adam said I was overreacting. My dad said I should hang up before I did something I'd regret. I didn't hang up. I explained the situation to the dispatcher and gave my address. They said an officer would be there within 20 minutes. Laura grabbed her purse and said they should go. Adam started picking up boxes. My dad told me I was making a huge mistake and that I'd regret turning my back on family. My mom said if I went through with this, I shouldn't expect them to have anything to do with me anymore. I said that sounded fine. They started carrying things out to the truck. It took them about 15 minutes to get everything loaded. By the time the police arrived, they were gone. The officer took my statement. I showed him my lease and identification with my current address. I showed him the old lock and explained that I hadn't authorized anyone to enter my apartment or change the locks. I gave him my parents' names and address along with Laura and Adam's names. He said he'd file a report and someone from the department would follow up. He recommended I change the locks again immediately because I had no way of knowing if they'd made copies of the new keys. I called a locksmith that night and had new locks installed the next morning before work. That night, I got 17 text messages from various family members. Most were from people I barely knew. They said I'd embarrassed the family by calling the police. They said Laura and Adam had only wanted help. They said I was selfish for not sharing when I had extra space. A few relatives took my side, including Aunt Judith, but most seemed to think I'd overreacted. Laura posted on Facebook that night. She said she'd tried to reach out to her brother for help and had been rejected. She said she'd hoped I'd changed, but clearly I was still the same selfish person I'd always been. She said she and Adam were struggling but trying their best. The post got dozens of sympathetic comments. I didn't respond publicly, but I did message 3 of my cousins privately with the full story. They were shocked when I told them about the break-in and the changed locks. Over the next few days, word spread through the family about what had actually happened. The narrative started to shift. My Aunt Judith posted a comment on Laura's Facebook post asking if it was true that they'd broken into my apartment without my permission. Laura deleted the whole post after that. My cousin David, who I'd always gotten along with, called me and said several family members were now questioning Laura's version of events. I got a call from a detective the following Monday. He asked if I wanted to press charges for breaking and entering. I said yes. He said he'd follow up with my parents about their involvement with the locksmith. I gave him the locksmith's information from the company sticker on the old lock mechanism that I'd kept. That was where things stood until yesterday. Update 1: It has been 3 weeks since Laura and Adam tried to move into my apartment. I need to update because the situation has escalated in ways I did not expect. After I filed the police report and spoke with a detective, things got quiet for about a week. I did not hear from my parents or Laura. A few relatives called to check on me, but most of the family seemed to be waiting to see what would happen next. The detective called me back 8 days after our first conversation. He said he had interviewed my parents and the locksmith they had hired. The locksmith confirmed that my father had called him and said it was an emergency because his son was locked out of his apartment and needed to get in quickly. The locksmith said my father had given him the address and met him there with identification that matched the last name. The locksmith assumed everything was legitimate. The detective said the locksmith was not going to face any charges because he had been deceived. However, my parents had knowingly arranged for unauthorized entry into my apartment, which constituted criminal trespass and potentially breaking and entering. The detective asked again if I wanted to move forward with charges. I told him I needed some time to think about it. He said that was fine, but I should let him know within the next week or 2. I spent several days going back and forth on what to do. Part of me wanted to just move on and cut my parents and Laura out of my life completely. Another part of me was angry about what they had done and wanted them to face consequences. While I was trying to decide, my cousin Jennifer called me. She said there had been a big argument at my parents' house a few days earlier. Laura's husband Adam had apparently been talking about looking for a new apartment for him and Laura to rent, and Laura had refused. She said she did not want to spend money on rent when my parents had a house. Adam had pointed out that they could not live with her parents forever, especially if they wanted to start a family. Laura had said that was exactly why they needed to stay with her parents so they could save money. My mother had apparently sided with Laura and said they could stay as long as they needed. Adam had gotten frustrated and left the house for several hours. Jennifer said the family was talking because it seemed like Laura and Adam's marriage was under strain. Some relatives felt bad for Adam because he worked full-time while Laura did not work at all. Others felt bad for Laura because they thought Adam was being unreasonable by expecting her to move out of a free living situation. I found the whole thing exhausting to hear about. I told Jennifer I appreciated her keeping me informed, but I was trying to distance myself from all of it. 2 days after that call, something else happened. I came home from work and found Laura sitting on the stoop outside my apartment building. She was alone. When she saw me, she stood up and said she needed to talk. I asked what she wanted. She said she wanted to apologize for what had happened and to explain herself. I told her I was not interested in hearing excuses. She started crying and said she had not realized how serious breaking into my apartment was. She said she had just been desperate for more space and had thought I would understand once I saw how much they needed it. She said our parents had convinced her it would be fine and that I would come around once I saw they were serious. I asked her why she thought she was entitled to my apartment just because I had an extra bedroom. She said she was not trying to be entitled. She said she had always felt like she came second to me when we were growing up and she had finally thought this was something I could do to help her. I was so surprised by that statement that I actually laughed. I asked her if she was serious. She said yes. She said I had always been the responsible one and the one who figured things out, and she had always felt like she was living in my shadow. I told her that was the most absurd thing I had ever heard. I reminded her that she got everything handed to her growing up while I worked for everything I had. I reminded her that our parents paid for her private school and her university while I went to community college and worked night shifts. I reminded her that she had been living rent-free with our parents for 6 years while I had lived in a camper for over a year. She said those things were different. She said our parents helped her because she needed it more. I asked her why she needed it more. She did not have an answer. I told her to leave. She said she was really trying to make things right and asked if there was anything she could do. I said she could start by getting a job and moving out of our parents' house instead of expecting other people to solve her problems. She got angry at that. She said I had no right to judge her life choices. She said not everyone wanted to work themselves to death like I did. I said I worked hard because no one else was going to take care of me. She said I was just bitter because I had a hard time during the pandemic. I told her to get off my property before I called the police again. She left. That night I got a series of angry text messages from my mother. She said Laura had come home very upset after trying to apologize to me. She said I had been cruel and dismissive. She said Laura was struggling emotionally and I had made things worse. She said a real brother would be supportive instead of throwing past problems in Laura's face. I did not respond to any of the messages. The next morning, I called the detective and told him I wanted to move forward with pressing charges. He said he would pass the information along to the prosecutor's office. He said it would likely take a few weeks before anything official happened, but he would keep me updated. I felt some relief after making the decision. I had spent too long letting my family treat me like I was the problem. About a week and a half ago, my father called me. It was the first time I had heard from him directly since the break-in. He asked if we could meet for coffee to talk. I said anything he needed to say could be said over the phone. He said he wanted to apologize in person. I told him I was not interested in an apology unless it came with actual accountability. He asked what I meant by that. I said he and my mother had spent my entire childhood prioritizing Laura over me, and instead of acknowledging that now, they were still making excuses for her. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said I was exaggerating how bad things had been. He said they had always tried to be fair to both of us. I asked him if he really believed that. I brought up specific examples. The private school. The Europe trip. The paid university tuition. The free housing for 6 years. He said those were just ways they had helped Laura when she needed it. I asked why I never got help when I needed it. He said I had always been more independent and they assumed I was fine. I asked him if it ever occurred to him to ask me if I was fine instead of just assuming. He did not answer. I told him I had already spoken to the detective and was moving forward with charges. He said I was going to regret this decision. I said I doubted it. I hung up. Laura posted on Facebook again a few days ago. She wrote a long post about how toxic family members will try to bring you down when you are struggling. She said some people hold grudges forever and refuse to forgive. She said she was learning to set boundaries with people who did not support her growth. The post got a lot of supportive comments from people who did not know the full story. A few of my cousins commented asking what she was referring to. She did not respond to them. My Aunt Judith sent me a screenshot of the post and said Laura was clearly talking about me. I told her I knew and I did not care. Yesterday I got a call from a number I did not recognize. I answered and it was Adam. He said he needed to talk to me without Laura knowing. He asked if I could meet him somewhere. I was skeptical but I agreed. We met at a coffee shop near my work. Adam looked exhausted. He said he had been thinking about everything that had happened and he wanted to apologize for his part in it. He said he had gone along with Laura and my parents' plan because he had been desperate to get out of their house. He said he had not fully thought through what they were doing until the police showed up. He said things with Laura had gotten worse since then. She refused to discuss moving out or getting a job. She spent most of her time on her phone or watching TV. She had started criticizing him for working too much and not spending enough time with her. He said he felt trapped. I asked him why he did not just leave. He said he had thought about it but he still loved Laura and kept hoping she would change. I told him that in my experience, people only change when they have to. As long as our parents kept enabling her, she had no reason to change. He said he was starting to realize that. He thanked me for meeting with him and left. I do not know what to make of that conversation. Part of me felt bad for Adam because he seemed genuinely overwhelmed. Another part of me thought he had made his own choices and now had to deal with the consequences. Either way, it was not my problem to solve. The prosecutor's office called me yesterday afternoon. They said they were moving forward with charges against my parents for criminal trespass and conspiracy to commit burglary. The charges against Laura were still being reviewed. They said I might need to testify if the case went to trial, but it was more likely my parents would take a plea deal. I said I understood and would cooperate with whatever they needed. I have not told most of my family about the charges yet. I assume my parents will tell people once they are formally charged. I am sure there will be backlash and people will say I went too far. But I have spent my whole life being told to just accept how they treated me. I am done with that. They broke into my apartment and tried to move someone else in without my permission. That is not a family disagreement. That is a crime. And they should face the consequences. Update 2: The fallout from pressing charges has been worse than I expected. My parents were formally charged 3 weeks ago with criminal trespass and conspiracy. The prosecutor offered them a plea deal that would involve probation, community service, and restitution for the locksmith fees and my cost to change the locks again. They refused the deal. According to my Aunt Judith, my mother is convinced that if they go to trial, a jury will see that they were just trying to help their daughter and will side with them. My father apparently thinks the charges will be dismissed. Their lawyer must not be giving them good advice. Laura was also charged but with a lesser offense since she was not directly involved in arranging the locksmith. She was offered a plea deal that would involve a fine and probation. She refused it as well. Adam was not charged because the prosecutor determined he had been pressured into participating and showed genuine remorse. The family split after the charges became public. About half of my relatives think I went too far by pressing charges. They have said things like family should handle problems privately and that I am tearing the family apart over something that could have been resolved with a conversation. The other half think my parents and Laura created the situation themselves and need to face consequences. Thanksgiving was last week. I did not attend any family gathering. My Aunt Judith hosted a dinner and invited me, but I did not go because several of the relatives who think I am in the wrong were also attending. I spent Thanksgiving alone in my apartment with takeout from a Chinese restaurant. Adam called me again 2 weeks ago. He said he had moved out of my parents' house and was staying with a friend temporarily. He said he had asked Laura to come with him and look for a place together, but she had refused. She told him if he left, he was choosing to abandon her when she needed him most. He left anyway. He said they were not officially separated yet but were taking time apart. He sounded relieved to be out of that house even though he also sounded sad about his marriage falling apart. A few days after Adam moved out, Laura called me. I did not answer. She left a voicemail. She said Adam leaving was my fault because I had put ideas in his head when we met at the coffee shop. She said I had always been jealous of her relationship and was trying to ruin her life. She said if I had just let them move into my apartment, none of this would have happened. Her voice in the recording sounded raw and angry. I deleted it and blocked her number. My mother started calling me from different numbers. She would call from relatives' phones or from random numbers I did not recognize. When I answered, she would start talking before I could hang up. She said I was ruining their lives. She said my father might lose business clients once word got out about the charges. She said Laura was depressed and barely leaving her room. She said I had no idea what I had done to the family. I told her I knew exactly what I had done. I had set a boundary and enforced it. I said they could have avoided all of this by just respecting that I did not want them in my apartment. She said I was being vindictive. I hung up and blocked those numbers too. 3 weeks ago I got a call from my cousin David. He said he had some information I should know about. He said he had been talking to our Aunt Linda, who is my mother's oldest sister, and she had told him something that happened years ago when I was still in high school. Apparently there had been a big family discussion about the favoritism toward Laura. Several relatives had confronted my parents about it during a holiday gathering. They had pointed out that I was being treated unfairly and that it was going to cause long-term damage. My parents had gotten defensive. After that gathering, my parents had limited contact with most of the extended family. That explained why we only saw relatives on major holidays when I was a teenager. David said Aunt Linda had felt guilty for years about not doing more to help me. She said she had considered calling Child Protective Services but had been afraid of causing a rift in the family. I did not know what to say when David told me this. Part of me wished someone had intervened. Another part of me understood why they had not. It is hard to get involved in other people's family problems. Last week the prosecutor called me with an update. My parents' trial date had been set for February. Laura's case was still pending. The prosecutor said they were confident about getting a conviction based on the evidence, which included the locksmith's testimony, the old lock mechanism, and the statements from everyone involved. She asked if I was still willing to testify. I said yes. That same day I got a letter in the mail from my mother. It was handwritten on floral stationery. She wrote that she had been doing a lot of thinking and realized she had made mistakes as a parent. She said she had not meant to favor Laura and had just been trying to help her because Laura had always been more sensitive and needed more support. She said she had assumed I would be fine because I had always been capable and independent. She wrote that she was sorry for not showing up to my high school graduation and for not helping me when I needed somewhere to stay during the pandemic. She said she hoped I could forgive her and we could move past this as a family. At the end of the letter she asked me to drop the charges. She said they could not afford a trial and the stress was affecting my father's health. She said Laura was suffering because Adam had left and now she was alone at their house without him as a buffer. She said if I dropped the charges, they would all go to family counseling and work on rebuilding our relationships. She signed the letter with "Love Mom." I read the letter 3 times. Then I threw it away. It was not a real apology. It was a last attempt to manipulate me into backing down. She had not taken any real responsibility. She had just made more excuses. And the request to drop the charges at the end made it clear that she was not actually sorry. She just wanted to avoid consequences. I called the prosecutor the next day and told her I had received the letter. I asked if my mother contacting me was allowed. She said technically yes because there was no restraining order in place, but if I felt harassed I could request one. I said I would think about it. She said the trial prep would begin in January and she would be in touch after the holidays. Adam texted me a few days ago. He said he had filed for divorce. He said Laura had not taken it well and had blamed me in a series of angry messages to him. He said he wanted to thank me for being honest with him about how enabling works. He said our conversation had helped him realize he could not keep waiting for Laura to change. I told him I was glad he was doing what was best for himself. He said he would probably need to testify at the trial since he had been present during the break-in. I said that was between him and the prosecutor. Yesterday I got a message from a cousin I had not heard from in years. She said Laura had posted a GoFundMe page asking for money to help with legal fees. The page said she was being unfairly prosecuted by an aggressive prosecutor who did not understand family dynamics. It said she and our parents were victims of a misunderstanding that had been blown out of proportion. It asked for $15,000. So far it had raised $300, mostly from people who did not know the full story. My cousin asked if I knew about the page. I said I did not, but I was not surprised. I reported the GoFundMe page for containing false information. I do not know if they will take it down, but I included links to news articles about the charges that gave accurate information about what happened. I also sent the link to my Aunt Judith and asked her to share the truth with anyone who might donate. She said she would. I have been thinking a lot about whether I made the right choice by pressing charges. Some days I feel confident that I did the right thing. Other days I wonder if I should have just moved on and cut contact without involving the legal system. But then I remember walking into my apartment and finding them there. I remember my dad arranging for someone to break in. I remember Laura sitting on my bed taking pictures like she had already decided my space belonged to her. And I know I made the right choice. They needed to learn that actions have consequences. Maybe they will learn that through this process. Or maybe they will keep making excuses and playing the victim. Either way, it is not my responsibility anymore. Update 3: The trial happened 2 weeks ago. I am writing this final update because several relatives have asked what happened and I am tired of explaining it multiple times. This will be the last time I discuss this situation publicly. The trial lasted 3 days. I testified on the first day. The prosecutor asked me to describe what happened when I came home and found my family in my apartment. I explained the timeline and showed the photos I had taken of the old lock mechanism and the evidence they had left behind. I was on the stand for about 90 minutes. The defense attorney tried to make it seem like I had overreacted to a family misunderstanding. She asked why I had called the police instead of just asking them to leave. I said I had asked them to leave and they refused. She asked if I had considered that my sister was desperate and needed help. I said desperation did not justify breaking into someone's home. My mother cried during my testimony. My father sat stone-faced. Laura was not in the courtroom because her case was separate. The defense also tried to argue that my father had genuinely believed he was helping me by arranging for the locksmith because he thought I had locked myself out. The locksmith testified that my father had never said I was inside the apartment or that it was an emergency where I needed immediate access. That undermined their story. Adam testified on the second day. He confirmed that the plan had been for him and Laura to move into my apartment without my permission. He said my parents had assured them I would be fine with it once I saw they were serious. He said he had been uncomfortable with the plan but had gone along with it because he wanted to get out of my parents' house. The defense tried to paint him as an unreliable witness because he was going through a divorce with Laura, but his testimony matched everything else in the record. The jury deliberated for about 5 hours. They found my parents guilty on both counts. Sentencing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. My mother broke down crying when the verdict was read. My father put his head in his hands. Several relatives who had attended the trial left the courtroom immediately. I stayed until the end. Laura's case was resolved separately with a plea deal the week after my parents' trial. She accepted a deal that included a fine, 1 year of probation, and 50 hours of community service. She did not have to serve any jail time. According to Adam, she took the deal because her lawyer told her she would lose if she went to trial, especially after my parents were convicted. My parents were sentenced last week. They each received 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and were ordered to pay restitution of $3,000 to cover the locksmith fees, my lock replacement, and my legal costs. They were also ordered to have no contact with me unless I initiated it. The judge said in her remarks that parents who use their relationship with their children to violate boundaries and commit crimes set a dangerous precedent. She said my parents had shown poor judgment and a lack of respect for the law. My mother cried through the entire sentencing. My father did not look at me once. The fallout in the family has been significant. About a third of my relatives have stopped speaking to me entirely. They think I destroyed my parents' reputation over something minor. Another third have been supportive and have said my parents needed to face consequences for their actions. The remaining third seem to be trying to stay neutral and not take sides. I have accepted that some relationships are over. I am okay with that. Adam's divorce from Laura was finalized 2 weeks ago. They did not have any assets to divide since they had been living with my parents and had no savings. Adam moved to a different city for a new job. He sent me a text before he left saying, "Thank you for being honest with him about everything." I wished him well. Laura still lives with my parents. According to my Aunt Judith, she has not gotten a job and spends most of her time in her room. My parents are apparently struggling to pay the restitution on top of their legal fees. My father lost 2 business clients who did not want to be associated with someone who had been convicted of a crime. My mother has stopped attending church because she does not want to face people who know what happened. I have not spoken to any of them since the sentencing. I do not plan to. The no contact order makes that easier since they cannot reach out to me even if they wanted to. I have blocked their numbers and their social media accounts. I have asked relatives not to pass along messages from them. Most have respected that request. I hosted a small dinner at my apartment last weekend for the relatives who supported me through this process. My Aunt Judith came, along with my cousins David and Jennifer and a few others. It was nice to spend time with family who actually treated me like family. We did not talk about the trial or my parents. We just had dinner and played cards and acted like normal people. Someone asked me if I regretted pressing charges. I said no. I said I regretted that it had to happen at all, but I did not regret holding them accountable. They made a choice to break into my apartment. They made a choice to try to move Laura in without asking me. They made a choice to lie to the locksmith and to refuse to leave when I told them to. Those were their choices. The consequences were the result of those choices. I do not know what will happen with my parents and Laura going forward. I do not spend time thinking about it anymore. I have my job and my apartment and my friends and the relatives who actually care about me. That is enough. I am not interested in reconciliation or rebuilding a relationship with people who have shown me repeatedly that they do not respect me. Some people will say that is harsh or unforgiving. I think it is just being realistic. This will be my last update on this situation. I am closing this chapter and moving forward. Thank you to everyone who offered support and advice. It helped more than you know. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. My mom signed away her rights and abandoned me when I was a baby, came back when dad got successful, and now she and her new boyfriend want to take everything. Yesterday I came home to find my dad's prized vinyl collection scattered across the garage floor. His records, the ones he'd spent decades collecting, were snapped in half, album covers torn, and everything tossed around like garbage. My mom's boyfriend Jason stood there with a smug look on his face, telling me they needed the space for his workout equipment. The collection was worth thousands, but more importantly, it was one of the few things I'd left of my dad after he passed away 6 months ago. I lost it. I screamed at both of them, and now my mom is telling everyone I'm overreacting and being disrespectful to her new relationship. I'm Alex, 26M, and this is just the latest chapter in a long, complicated history with my mom. I never knew my mom growing up. She got pregnant with me during her freshman year of college. According to my grandparents, she viewed the pregnancy as a trap that would ruin her life. She signed away her parental rights when I was just a few months old and disappeared. My dad, 19 at the time, stepped up immediately. He moved in with my grandparents, worked 2 jobs while taking night classes, and never once complained about raising me alone. My earliest memories are of my dad reading me bedtime stories after his shift at the factory, no matter how tired he was. My grandparents were always there too, Grandma teaching me to bake cookies while Grandpa took me fishing on weekends. We didn't have much money, but I never felt like I was missing anything. By the time I was 8, Dad had finished his business degree and landed a job at a tech startup. He worked his way up quickly, and we moved into our own house when I was 10. The house wasn't fancy, but it was in a good school district, and Dad was proud that he could provide a stable home for me. We established routines: Saturday morning pancakes, Sunday afternoon bike rides, and movie nights every Friday. Then, when I was 14, my mom suddenly reappeared. It happened right after Dad's company went public, and he received a substantial payout as one of the early employees. Suddenly, the woman who couldn't be bothered to send a birthday card for 14 years wanted to reconnect. Dad, who had never said a bad word about her, seemed thrilled. I wasn't. Mom insisted I call her by her first name, Diane. She dressed like she was going to a club rather than picking me up from school. She bought me expensive gifts without asking what I liked or needed. Everything about her felt wrong. During my high school graduation party, Diane showed up in a dress that made my friends' parents uncomfortable. She flirted with my math teacher and kept interrupting my conversations to pull me away for photos. When Dad gave a heartfelt speech about how proud he was of me, Diane chimed in with stories about her college days, as if she had any right to share in this milestone. Dad refused to see any issues with her behavior. Whenever I tried to talk to him about it, he'd say I needed to give her a chance because everyone deserves forgiveness. Meanwhile, Diane became a fixture in our lives, despite contributing nothing to the household. When I was 17, Diane announced she was pregnant. She wasn't happy about it. I overheard multiple arguments between her and Dad about her not wanting another child. Dad convinced her to keep the baby, promising to handle most of the childcare himself. My brother, Jake, was born just before I started college. Dad kept his promise. He adjusted his work schedule, hired help when needed, and devoted himself to Jake. Diane, meanwhile, rarely changed a diaper or prepared a meal. When Jake cried at night, it was always Dad who got up. When he needed help with homework, Dad sat with him for hours. Diane was too busy with her social life to be bothered. I came home from college every weekend to help with Jake. We developed a strong bond. I taught him to ride a bike, helped him with his reading, and took him to the park when Dad needed a break. Jake learned early not to expect much from Diane, and the 3 of us formed our own little unit. Last year, Dad was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The prognosis was grim from the start. Jake, now 9, and I spent every possible moment with him. I took a leave of absence from work to drive Dad to his treatments. Jake made cards and drawings to decorate Dad's hospital room. We did everything we could to make his final months comfortable. Diane continued her regular social schedule. She attended a spa weekend during Dad's second round of chemo. She complained about having to prepare simple meals when Dad was too sick to cook. When Dad was in severe pain, she'd often be out with friends, unreachable by phone. Dad passed away 6 months ago. Jake and I held his hands until the end. Diane was there too, but spent most of the time on her phone in the hallway. At the funeral, she wore sunglasses inside, but her face remained dry while Jake and I could barely stand. After the funeral, we learned that Dad had updated his will after his diagnosis. The house, which was fully paid off, was left to Jake and me in a trust. Diane could continue living there until Jake turned 18, but the property belonged to us. Dad's savings were similarly protected, with monthly allowances for Jake's care and education. Diane was furious. She'd expected to inherit everything and control all the assets. The lawyer explained that Dad had set things up this way to ensure both his children were protected. Dad knew exactly what he was doing. I moved back into the house to help care for Jake and manage the trust. I drew up a formal rental agreement for Diane, charging her below market rent that went directly into Jake's college fund. I made it clear that I was now the landlord, not her son. 3 months after Dad died, Diane started dating Jason, 34M. He's only 8 years older than me but acts like he's the man of the house. He started moving his things in without asking, rearranged furniture, and took over the garage for his workout equipment. Yesterday's incident with Dad's vinyl collection was the last straw. Those records were Dad's pride and joy. He'd spent years hunting down rare editions at flea markets and record stores. When Jake was little, Dad would play a different album each night as they built Lego sets together. After the cancer diagnosis, Dad spent hours organizing the collection and creating a catalog so Jake and I would know what each record meant to him. After I found the destroyed collection, Diane announced that she and Jason are getting married next month. She expects us to be happy for her and to welcome Jason as our new dad. She told me I need to move my things out of the master bedroom because they'll be taking it over after the wedding. I refused. The confrontation escalated until I told her that marrying Jason doesn't give either of them any right to the house or to destroy Dad's belongings. I reminded her that legally, she's a tenant, not an owner. She laughed and said no judge would evict a mother from her home. I've contacted the lawyer who handled Dad's will. I'm prepared to begin eviction proceedings if necessary. Jake is staying with my grandparents until this situation is resolved. I won't let Diane and Jason destroy anything else that Dad left for us. Am I overreacting about the vinyl collection? Should I just let them take over to keep the peace for Jake's sake? I know Dad would want us all to get along, but I don't think he'd want his memory disrespected like this. Update 1, 2 weeks later, the past 2 weeks have been chaotic. After posting here, I took everyone's advice and documented the damage to Dad's vinyl collection. I photographed everything and created an itemized list with approximate values. The total came to nearly $15,000, though many items were irreplaceable. I met with Dad's lawyer the next day. He confirmed that my position as co-trustee of the house gave me the authority to enforce the rental agreement with Diane. He also suggested filing a police report about the destroyed property, which I did that afternoon. When I returned home, Diane and Jason had changed the locks. I called a locksmith who, after verifying my ID and property records, let me back in. Inside, I discovered they had started clearing out Dad's office as well. His books were packed in boxes labeled Goodwill, and his desk had been disassembled. The confrontation that followed was ugly. Jason puffed out his chest and tried to intimidate me. Diane screamed that I was being cruel to her after she gave me life. I remained calm and handed them both copies of an official eviction notice, giving them 30 days to vacate the property. That same evening, Diane called my grandparents and told them I was unstable and shouldn't be around Jake. My grandparents, who have never had any illusions about Diane, immediately called me. They put Jake on the phone so I could explain what was happening in terms he could understand. Jake asked if he could stay with them until the yelling stops. I agreed that was best. The next day, Diane launched a social media campaign against me. She posted old photos of us together, mostly from staged holiday gatherings, and wrote a long post about how her son had turned against her just when she had found happiness again. Many of her friends commented with support, calling me ungrateful and cruel. My phone blew up with messages from distant relatives and family friends who only knew Diane's version of events. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I spent the day securing Dad's remaining belongings. I moved his important papers, remaining collectibles, and sentimental items to a storage unit. I also gathered Jake's favorite toys and clothes and took them to my grandparents' house. A week into the eviction period, I came home from work to find water all over the first floor. The upstairs bathtub had been left running with the drain closed. Water had seeped through the ceiling, damaging the hardwood floors Dad had installed himself. Diane and Jason were nowhere to be found. I spent the night with industrial fans trying to minimize the damage. I called the lawyer again. He advised amending the eviction notice to include property damage and filed for an emergency hearing. The judge granted us an expedited hearing date set for next week. 2 days ago, Diane showed up at my workplace. She caused a scene in the lobby, telling everyone within earshot that I was trying to make her homeless. My boss, who knew about my dad's passing, was understanding but suggested I work from home until this situation is resolved. Yesterday, I received a text message from Diane with a photo of Dad's will. She had highlighted a passage about her right to reside in the house and circled the phrase until Jake turns 18. Her message read, "You can't evict me. This is my house for the next 9 years." I forwarded the message to the lawyer. He pointed out that the will specifically stated she could reside there provided she maintains the property in good condition and does not cause damage. The documented destruction of property and water damage gives us grounds to terminate her residency rights. This morning, I visited Jake at my grandparents' house. He asked when he could come home. I promised him we'd fix up the house once Diane and Jason were gone, and he could help choose new paint colors for his room. He showed me a picture he drew of Dad surrounded by his vinyl records, floating on clouds. He asked if we could frame it and hang it in the living room. I promised we would. The hearing is in 5 days. The lawyer believes we have a strong case for immediate eviction due to the property damage. I've gathered all the evidence, including security camera footage from the front door showing Diane and Jason leaving with suitcases right around the time the bathtub would have been left running. I'm staying with a friend until after the hearing, only going to the house to check for additional damage. My grandparents have temporary guardianship of Jake. Diane hasn't attempted to see him once since this began. I never wanted things to get this bad. All I asked was for Diane to respect Dad's memory and his belongings. Instead, she's chosen to destroy everything he built. I won't let her take the house that Dad worked so hard to provide for us. Jake deserves to grow up in the home his father created for him, surrounded by memories of a parent who actually cared. Update 2, 1 month later, the court hearing happened 3 weeks ago. I arrived early with my lawyer and all the documentation of the damage. Diane showed up 20 minutes late with Jason and a lawyer who seemed unprepared. The judge reviewed our evidence, the photographs of the destroyed vinyl collection, the water damage, the security footage, and the terms of Dad's will. Diane's lawyer argued that she was Jake's mother and had the right to remain in the family home. The judge asked about her involvement in Jake's life before Dad's death. When her lawyer couldn't provide specific examples, the judge asked Diane directly about her parenting responsibilities. Diane stumbled through vague answers about being there for Jake. My lawyer presented statements from Jake's teachers noting that Dad attended every parent-teacher conference alone, and that I was listed as the secondary contact, not Diane. We also submitted medical records showing Dad as the parent who brought Jake to doctor's appointments. The turning point came when the judge asked about Jake's current living situation. I explained that he was staying with my grandparents during this conflict. Diane interrupted, claiming she'd been blocked from seeing her son. My lawyer calmly presented Diane's phone records, which had been subpoenaed, showing she hadn't called my grandparents' house once since Jake went to stay with them. The judge ruled in our favor. Diane and Jason were ordered to vacate the property within 48 hours. Additionally, they were held liable for the property damage, totaling nearly $30,000 including the water damage to the floors. As they left the courtroom, Jason muttered something about this not being over. My lawyer immediately filed for a restraining order, which was granted the next day. When I returned to the house after the 48-hour period, I found it in worse condition than I'd feared. They had taken appliances that belonged to the house, punched holes in several walls, and poured paint on the carpets in the bedrooms. I hired a professional cleaning crew and contractors to begin repairs. 2 days after the eviction, Diane's mother, who I'd met only twice in my life, called me. She said Diane had always struggled with maternal feelings and suggested I was being too harsh. She offered to mediate between us, proposing that Diane and Jason move back in while I found my own place. I declined and ended the call. The next surprise came when Jake and I were shopping for supplies to fix up his room. We ran into Jason's ex-wife and their daughter at the hardware store. She recognized me from Diane's social media posts and approached us. She warned me that Jason had pulled similar stunts with her, moving in, causing damage, and refusing to leave when their relationship ended. She gave me her contact information in case I needed a witness for any future legal proceedings. Last week, I received a letter from a different lawyer representing Diane. This one claimed that Diane and Dad had a verbal agreement that she would inherit the house. The letter demanded we enter mediation or face a lawsuit. My lawyer responded with copies of Dad's last 3 will versions, all of which contain the same provisions regarding the house, dating back to when he first received his cancer diagnosis. Despite all this drama, there have been positive developments. Jake moved back into the house once the repairs to his room were completed. He seems relieved to be home and has been helping me repaint the living room. My boss allowed me to continue working remotely while we get the house back in order. I've been searching for replacement vinyl records to rebuild Dad's collection. While many were rare and can't be replaced, I've found about 30 so far. Jake and I spend evenings looking through online marketplaces together, and he's learning about the music Dad loved. My grandparents have been incredible throughout this process. They've helped with repairs, cooked meals for us, and provided stability for Jake. Grandpa even found one of Dad's rarest records at a flea market last weekend. Jake jumped up and down when we added it to the new collection. The insurance company finally processed our claim for the water damage and other destruction. The payout won't cover everything, but it's enough to make the necessary repairs. I'm using some of Dad's life insurance money, which was separate from the trust, to cover the difference. Yesterday, I received another text from Diane. This one was different from her usual threats. She wrote that she's moving to Florida with Jason next month and wanted to see Jake before they leave. After consulting with my lawyer, I agreed to a supervised visit at a public park this weekend. Jake is nervous about seeing her but said he's willing to try. I've changed the locks, installed security cameras, and fixed the alarm system Dad had put in years ago. I'm trying to balance security with creating a comfortable home for Jake. My lawyer assures me that our legal position is solid now that the court has ruled on the eviction. For the first time since Dad died, I feel like we might be able to move forward. The house is slowly becoming a home again. Jake asked if we could plant a tree in the backyard in Dad's memory. We're doing that this weekend, after his visit with Diane. Update 3, final update, 3 months later. It's been 3 months since my last update, and our lives have finally settled into a new normal. The supervised visit between Jake and Diane at the park lasted only 15 minutes. Diane spent most of the time talking about her upcoming move to Florida and her wedding plans with Jason. She didn't ask Jake about school or his interests. When she left, Jake simply shrugged and asked if we could get ice cream. We haven't heard from her since. True to her word, Diane moved to Florida with Jason. They got married in a beachside ceremony last month, according to the photos posted by mutual acquaintances. She didn't invite Jake or mention him in any of the wedding posts. Her parting gift was a formal relinquishment of her parental rights to Jake, which arrived via certified mail with no accompanying note. The paperwork actually simplified things for us. I filed for full legal guardianship of Jake, which was granted without contest. The judge noted the unusual circumstance of both biological parents having relinquished rights at different times but agreed it was in Jake's best interest to remain with me. My grandparents were named as secondary guardians in case anything happens to me. The house repairs were finally completed last month. We replaced the damaged floors, repainted every room, and fixed the holes in the walls. Jake chose bright colors for his bedroom and helped arrange his furniture. We converted Dad's office into a music room, displaying the vinyl records we've managed to collect so far in custom shelves built by Grandpa. The tree we planted for Dad in the backyard has taken root and grown several inches already. Jake waters it daily and has started a journal where he records its progress. Sometimes I find him sitting beside it, telling stories about his day as if Dad can hear him. We established new routines to give Jake stability. Sunday dinners with my grandparents, movie nights on Fridays, just like Dad used to do, and Saturday morning trips to local record stores to hunt for additions to our growing collection. Jake's teachers report that his grades have improved, and he's more engaged in class activities. Last week, I received an unexpected package from Jason's ex-wife. She had found several of Dad's records at a pawn shop near her home, records that had gone missing during the eviction process. She recognized them from the list I had shared when we met and bought them back for us. Jake recognized one album immediately, the first record Dad had ever purchased as a teenager. The legal issues with Diane appear to be finished. She never followed through on the threatened lawsuit about the verbal agreement. My lawyer believes the relinquishment of parental rights was her way of washing her hands of the situation entirely. The restraining order remains in effect, though with her in Florida, it seems unnecessary now. I've had time to reflect on everything that happened. While going through Dad's papers, I found letters he had written to me and Jake but never sent. They were dated during his final months. In mine, he apologized for not seeing Diane clearly and for the tension her presence caused in our home. He wrote that his greatest joy was raising me and seeing the man I had become. In Jake's letter, he shared memories from Jake's early years and expressed confidence that I would help guide Jake as he grew up. Those letters confirmed what I already knew. Dad was aware of the reality of our family dynamics, even if he never directly addressed them while he was alive. He had planned carefully to protect both Jake and me from exactly the situation that unfolded after his death. Tomorrow is the 6-month anniversary of the eviction hearing. Jake and I are hosting a small gathering at the house, just my grandparents, a few close friends, and 2 of Dad's former colleagues who have remained in touch. We're going to play Dad's favorite albums, grill in the backyard, and celebrate the home and family he created. The house truly belongs to Jake and me now, not just legally but in every sense that matters. We've reclaimed it from the chaos Diane and Jason created and transformed it back into the haven Dad intended it to be. Jake talks about Dad every day, sharing memories and asking questions about him. I do my best to keep Dad's memory alive while helping Jake build his own identity. As for Diane, Jake rarely mentions her anymore. When he does, it's without emotion, as if she's a distant acquaintance rather than his biological mother. I don't encourage negative talk about her, but I don't pretend she was something she wasn't. When Jake is older, he can decide for himself what kind of relationship, if any, he wants with her. For now, we're focusing on our future. The trust Dad established ensures Jake's education is secured. I've been promoted at work and can continue the flexible schedule that allows me to be there for Jake. My grandparents remain our strongest support system, just as they were for Dad and me all those years ago. The story of our family isn't what most people would consider traditional, but it's ours. Dad created something valuable and lasting despite the challenges he faced as a young single father. My job now is to continue his legacy by giving Jake the same stability, support, and love that Dad gave me. Story 2. My parent had a ridiculous demand from me: postpone your wedding for 10 years, all because my 30-year-old brother was in a delicate phase. I got married in secret and all hell broke loose. I never thought I'd be posting my family drama on Reddit, but here I am. I'm a 26-year-old female who's been working as an accountant at a respectable firm for the past 4 years. My life has been relatively stable. I graduated with my accounting degree, landed a good job, and have been steadily working my way up in the company. Numbers make sense to me, and I enjoy the structured environment of my workplace. I've been with my fiancé Jeremy for 6 years now. We met during our junior year of college when we were both studying late in the library. He was working on an engineering project, and I was finishing an accounting assignment. We struck up a conversation about how the vending machine had eaten his dollar, and somehow that turned into a 3-hour chat. Jeremy has his master's in engineering and works for a construction company that specializes in sustainable building practices. He's patient, logical, and has always been my rock. Jeremy proposed 2 years ago during a weekend trip to a lakeside cabin. We've been planning our spring wedding for months now, booking vendors and finding the perfect venue. Everything was going smoothly until last week when my parents asked me to come over for dinner. For context, I should explain my family dynamics. My brother Harry is 30 years old and has always been my parents' favorite child. Growing up, Harry was labeled a creative genius with unlimited potential, while I was just the responsible one. Harry started a tech company right after college that failed within 8 months. Then he tried to become a professional photographer, which lasted about a year before he moved back home. For the past several years, he's been living with my parents, occasionally taking odd jobs while working on various big plans that never materialize. Despite Harry's track record, my parents still treat him like he's destined for greatness. When I got my promotion last year, my mom simply said, "That's nice, dear," before immediately changing the subject to Harry's new idea for a podcast that was going to revolutionize online content. When Harry failed to pay back the $5,000 my parents loaned him for camera equipment, they brushed it off as an investment in his future. Meanwhile, they reminded me for years about the $800 they helped me with for textbooks in college, which I paid back within 6 months. Jeremy has always been polite to my family, though I could tell from the beginning that he noticed the favoritism. During family gatherings, he would shoot me a knowing look whenever my parents would go on about Harry's latest scheme while barely asking about my work or our relationship. Still, Jeremy made an effort, bringing thoughtful gifts to my parents and engaging Harry in conversation about his interests. Last Tuesday, my parents asked me to come to their house for dinner. When I arrived, they were sitting stiffly in the living room, the formal one that's only used for important discussions or when my dad's boss comes over. My mom gestured for me to sit down on the sofa across from them. That's when they dropped their bombshell request. They wanted me to postpone my wedding for 8 to 10 years. I thought they were joking at first. But my father's stern expression made it clear this wasn't a prank. He explained that Harry was going through a delicate phase and needed to find stability before I got married. According to my parents, there needed to be a natural family order, and since Harry was older, he should get married first. My mother added that Harry had recently started dating a woman named Riley, and they believed she might be the one for him. They explained that Harry was planning something big career-wise in the next few years, though they were frustratingly vague about what exactly these plans entailed. Apparently, my wedding would somehow interfere with Harry's progress. I sat there, staring at them, waiting for one of them to crack a smile or say they were testing me. But they continued with complete seriousness, suggesting that Jeremy and I could have a long engagement, and that postponing for nearly a decade wasn't a big deal since we were already committed to each other. When I finally found my voice, I asked them to explain how my wedding would impact Harry's life in any way. My father claimed that seeing his younger sister get married before him would damage Harry's self-esteem and derail his progress. My mother nodded along, adding that Harry had mentioned feeling anxious about my upcoming wedding. I pointed out that Jeremy and I had been together for 6 years, lived together for 3, and had been engaged for 2. We'd already postponed our wedding once because of COVID. I reminded them that Harry had only been dating Riley for 3 months. My parents weren't swayed. My mother's voice took on that guilt-inducing tone she's perfected over the years. She mentioned how much they'd sacrificed for my education and reminded me about my responsibilities to the family. My father brought up the family vacation they'd taken me on during my sophomore year of college, as if that somehow obligated me to put my life on hold for a decade. As the conversation continued, their arguments became more absurd. They suggested I was being selfish for not considering Harry's feelings. My father actually said, "Your wedding is just one day, but Harry's potential breakthrough could change all our lives." My mother added that I already had stability with Jeremy, so waiting wouldn't hurt me, but Harry needed this win. After nearly 2 hours of this nonsense, I left their house without agreeing to anything. I drove home in a daze, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The streetlights blurred through my windshield as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. When I got home and told Jeremy about my parents' request, he nearly spilled his coffee. After confirming multiple times that I wasn't exaggerating or misunderstanding what they'd said, he put down his mug and paced around our kitchen. Jeremy has always been careful about criticizing my family, but that night, he didn't hold back. He couldn't believe they would ask us to put our lives on hold for Harry's nebulous potential. Jeremy and I talked until well after midnight. We discussed every angle of the situation, including the possibility of talking to my parents again to make them see reason. But the more we talked, the more we realized that my parents weren't going to change their minds. They had always prioritized Harry, and this was just the most extreme example. That night, we made a decision. We weren't going to postpone our wedding, and we weren't going to fight with my parents about it either. Instead, we would get married anyway, just not in the way we had planned. Over the next few days, Jeremy and I canceled our original wedding plans and began organizing a smaller, secret ceremony. We found a beautiful garden venue with a last-minute opening for the following month. We created a tight guest list: Jeremy's parents and sister, our closest friends, and my aunt, the only family member who had consistently treated me as an equal to Harry. Planning the secret wedding was surprisingly liberating. Without my parents' input, we were free to choose exactly what we wanted. No arguments about the guest list, no pressure to invite distant relatives I barely knew, no debates about the menu or music. Just the things that mattered to us. Jeremy's parents were completely supportive. When we explained the situation, his mother hugged me for a long time while his father shook his head in disbelief at my parents' request. They offered to help with the costs we lost from canceling our original plans and insisted on hosting a dinner after the ceremony. The day of our wedding arrived with perfect weather. The garden was full of blooming flowers, and the small pavilion had been decorated simply with white lights and greenery. Jeremy's sister had arranged for a string quartet, a surprise gift that brought tears to my eyes when I heard the first notes as I walked down the aisle. During our vows, I looked around at the small group of people who had gathered to support us. Each person there had chosen to be present, knowing the circumstances. There was no family drama, no tensions, no comparing me to Harry. Just genuine happiness for Jeremy and me. After the ceremony, we had dinner at Jeremy's parents' house. They had transformed their backyard with tables, lights, and flowers. We ate, drank, and celebrated with people who cared about our happiness. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the shadow of Harry's potential hanging over me. 2 days after the wedding, one of our friends posted photos on social media. I had been planning to tell my parents about the wedding in person, but before I could arrange a meeting, my phone exploded with notifications. My mother called 14 times in a row. My father sent a series of increasingly angry text messages. Even Harry called, which was rare since he usually communicated through our parents. My mother's voicemails started with shock and quickly escalated to accusations of betrayal. She claimed I had humiliated the family and ruined Harry's chances with Riley by being so selfish. My father's texts accused me of being ungrateful for everything they had done for me. Harry sent a rambling message about how I had always been jealous of him and was trying to sabotage his happiness. I didn't respond to any of them that day. Jeremy and I had taken a long weekend at a coastal bed and breakfast as a mini honeymoon, and I refused to let my family's reaction spoil our time together. Instead, I turned off my phone and focused on enjoying my first days as Jeremy's wife. The next morning, I received an unexpected call from my aunt. She congratulated us on the wedding and then hesitantly told me something she thought I should know. According to her, Harry had been planning to propose to Riley, despite having only dated her for 3 months. My parents had apparently been encouraging this, seeing Riley as a stabilizing influence on Harry. My aunt had heard from a friend who worked with Riley that she had been expressing doubts about the relationship, feeling that Harry was too dependent and directionless. This revelation made my parents' request even more absurd. They wanted me to put my life on hold for up to a decade so that Harry could rush into marriage with someone who was already having second thoughts about their relationship. When we returned from our weekend away, I turned my phone back on to find more messages, including one from Riley asking to meet for coffee. Curious about her perspective, I agreed to meet her the following day at a cafe halfway between our workplaces. Update 1. 2 weeks later, the meeting with Riley revealed more than I expected. She arrived at the cafe looking exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and her hair hastily pulled back. After brief congratulations on my marriage, she launched into the real reason she wanted to meet. Riley explained that she and Harry had been dating for just over 3 months when my parents invited her to dinner and started making comments about future grandchildren and finally having a daughter-in-law. She was caught off guard by their intensity, especially since she and Harry were still in the early stages of dating. What surprised me most was Riley's description of my parents' behavior toward Harry. She said they treated him like he was still in college, doing his laundry and making excuses when he forgot commitments. According to Riley, Harry rarely cooked for himself and had no consistent schedule. He talked constantly about his big plans but spent most days playing video games or meeting with friends to discuss business ideas that never progressed beyond conversations. Riley admitted she had started dating Harry because he was charming and creative, but she quickly realized he had no practical skills or ambition beyond vague dreams. She had been trying to encourage him to apply for steady jobs, but my parents undermined her efforts by telling Harry he was too special for ordinary work and should hold out for something that matched his potential. The most shocking part came when Riley revealed that Harry had indeed been planning to propose, with a ring my parents had helped him select and partially paid for. Riley had found the ring in Harry's drawer a week before our wedding and confronted him about it. She told him she wasn't ready for marriage after just 3 months of dating, especially given his unstable situation. According to Riley, this triggered a meltdown from Harry. He called my parents, who then called Riley directly and tried to convince her that she was making a mistake. My mother suggested that Riley was being overly cautious and should grab the opportunity to marry someone with Harry's exceptional qualities. My father implied that Riley might not find someone better than Harry and shouldn't throw away her chance at happiness. Riley stood her ground, telling my parents it was inappropriate for them to pressure her about her relationship with Harry. This apparently led to a tense situation where my parents suggested Riley was leading Harry on and wasting his time if she wasn't committed to marriage. After that disastrous interaction, Riley had been seriously reconsidering the relationship. She explained that meeting me for coffee was partly to satisfy her curiosity about my family dynamics and partly to warn me about what had been happening. Before we parted, Riley mentioned that she was planning to break up with Harry that weekend. She had already found her own apartment and was preparing to move out of her current place, which was too close to my parents' house for comfort. I left that coffee meeting with my head spinning. The picture Riley painted of my parents' involvement in her relationship with Harry was disturbing. It seemed they were so determined to see Harry settled that they were willing to pressure a woman he'd known for just a few months into marrying him. That evening, I wrote a lengthy email to my parents. I didn't reveal that I had met with Riley, but I expressed my concerns about their treatment of Harry and their unreasonable request regarding my wedding. I suggested that their constant coddling and inflated praise might be preventing Harry from developing the skills and resilience he needed to succeed. I proposed family therapy as a way to address these patterns and build healthier relationships. I ended by saying I loved them but needed space to process everything that had happened. After sending the email, I blocked my parents' numbers for 48 hours. I needed time to think without their immediate reactions influencing me. Jeremy supported this decision, suggesting that some distance might help everyone gain perspective. During those 2 days of silence, I learned through mutual friends that Riley had indeed broken up with Harry. Apparently, he had not taken it well. My cousin reported that Harry had moved back to my parents' house and was refusing to leave his old bedroom. When I unblocked my parents' numbers, there were no messages waiting. The silence was unusual and concerning. I decided to call my aunt, who had always been a more balanced source of family information. My aunt informed me that my parents were in crisis mode dealing with Harry, who had taken the breakup extremely hard. According to her, Harry had been telling anyone who would listen that his life was falling apart because of me, claiming that my secret wedding had somehow caused Riley to reevaluate their relationship. This narrative was absurd, given what Riley had told me, but it fit the pattern of Harry avoiding responsibility and my parents enabling him. My aunt mentioned that my parents were so focused on Harry that they probably hadn't even processed my email yet. A week passed with no contact from my parents. Then, late one Friday night, there was a pounding on our apartment door. Jeremy opened it to find Harry, clearly intoxicated and belligerent. He pushed past Jeremy and started shouting at me, blaming me for Riley leaving him. He claimed that our wedding had stolen his thunder and made Riley question their relationship timeline. Jeremy stepped between us and firmly told Harry he needed to leave. Harry refused, becoming more agitated and knocking a lamp off the side table. When he took a step toward me, Jeremy physically blocked him and stated that if Harry didn't leave immediately, he would call the police. Harry eventually stormed out, but not before shouting that our parents were right about me being selfish and that I had ruined his life. The encounter left me shaking. Jeremy immediately checked to make sure all the doors and windows were locked, and we discussed whether we should file a police report. In the end, we decided to document the incident but not involve the authorities yet. The next morning, I received a text from my father asking if we could meet as a family to clear the air. I agreed but insisted the meeting take place at a neutral location, a private room at a local restaurant, rather than at my parents' house where Harry would have home field advantage. I also made it clear that Jeremy would be accompanying me and that if Harry showed any signs of the aggressive behavior he'd displayed at our apartment, we would leave immediately. My father agreed to these terms and scheduled the meeting for Sunday afternoon. As the meeting approached, Jeremy and I discussed our strategy. We agreed that we would remain calm but firm, focusing on specific behaviors rather than general accusations. Jeremy promised to support me but also pledged to intervene if the conversation became too heated or manipulative. I spent Saturday night tossing and turning, rehearsing what I wanted to say and anticipating my family's responses. Despite everything, these were still my parents, and part of me hoped they would finally hear me and recognize the dysfunctional patterns that had defined our family for so long. Update 2. 1 month later the family meeting at the restaurant started tense and only got worse. My parents arrived first, sitting close together on one side of the table. Harry showed up 10 minutes late, refusing to look at me or Jeremy as he slumped into his chair. My father began by saying he hoped we could have a civilized conversation about recent events. My mother added that she was hurt by my secretive behavior and felt I had deliberately excluded them from one of the most important days of my life. I took a deep breath and explained my perspective. I told them that their request to postpone my wedding for nearly a decade was unreasonable and hurtful. I pointed out that they had consistently prioritized Harry's feelings and potential over my actual accomplishments and happiness. Harry interrupted, claiming I was twisting the situation to make myself look good. He insisted that my parents had only been looking out for his well-being during a difficult time. When I asked what exactly this difficult time entailed, neither Harry nor my parents could provide a concrete answer beyond vague references to his career aspirations and the breakup with Riley, which had occurred after their request that I postpone my wedding. As the conversation continued, my mother became increasingly emotional. She admitted that she and my father had always been more concerned about Harry because they believed I was naturally competent while Harry needed extra support. According to her, they never meant to make me feel less valued, they just thought I didn't need their attention as much as Harry did. My father was more defensive, insisting that their request had been reasonable given the family circumstances. When Jeremy calmly asked what specific circumstances justified asking us to delay our wedding for nearly a decade, my father couldn't provide a clear answer. Instead, he changed the subject to Harry's recent struggles with Riley. That's when I decided to reveal what Riley had told me. I explained that she had reached out after our wedding and shared her concerns about Harry's lack of independence and my parents' inappropriate involvement in their relationship. I detailed how she had found the engagement ring and felt pressured by all three of them to rush into marriage despite her reservations. This revelation caused an uproar. Harry accused me of lying, while my mother became defensive about their interactions with Riley. My father tried to justify their behavior by claiming they were just trying to support Harry's relationship. Through the chaos, I maintained my position. I explained that I understood they loved Harry and wanted to see him happy, but their methods were harmful. By constantly shielding him from consequences and inflating his sense of exceptionalism, they were preventing him from developing the skills he needed to actually succeed. Meanwhile, they were treating me as an afterthought, assuming I didn't need their support or recognition because I was managing on my own. The turning point came when my father admitted that Harry had been struggling with depression for several years. Apparently, each failed venture had taken a toll on his self-esteem, and my parents had been trying to boost his confidence by emphasizing his potential. They genuinely believed that seeing his younger sister get married before him would worsen his mental state. While I sympathized with Harry's struggles, I pointed out that managing his mental health by manipulating family members wasn't a sustainable solution. I suggested again that therapy, both individual for Harry and family therapy for all of us, would be more beneficial than asking me to put my life on hold. By the end of the 3-hour meeting, we had reached an uneasy truce. My parents acknowledged that their request had been unfair, though they stopped short of a full apology. Harry remained largely silent after the initial outbursts, staring at the table and occasionally checking his phone. As we were preparing to leave, my mother asked if Jeremy and I would consider having a family celebration of our marriage once things had calmed down. I said I would think about it but made no promises. After the meeting, Jeremy and I went home exhausted. We agreed that while some truths had come to light, fundamental patterns remained unchanged. My parents had acknowledged their behavior was problematic but hadn't demonstrated a real commitment to change. Harry seemed more interested in avoiding blame than addressing his issues. In the weeks following the family meeting, my parents made a few attempts at reconciliation. My mother sent a text asking if we could have lunch. My father emailed an article about family dynamics with a note saying he was thinking about our conversation. Harry remained silent. I agreed to have lunch with my mother, setting clear boundaries about what I was and wasn't willing to discuss. During our meal, she seemed genuinely interested in hearing about my work and my life with Jeremy, topics that had previously been overshadowed by Harry's latest schemes. She revealed that my father had been researching therapists who specialized in family systems and adult children. According to her, they had realized that their approach to parenting had created unhealthy patterns that were affecting all of us. She said they were considering ways to encourage Harry to become more independent, starting with asking him to contribute to household expenses if he continued living with them. While these were positive steps, I remained cautious. Years of established behavior wouldn't change overnight, and I needed to see consistent action rather than just good intentions. Jeremy and I decided to book the honeymoon we had postponed, 2 weeks in Portugal, far from family drama and work stress. We needed time to focus on our relationship and process everything that had happened. The night before we left for our trip, I received an unexpected text from Harry. It was brief and awkward, but it was the first direct communication we'd had since the family meeting. He wrote that he was starting therapy the following week and had applied for a job at a local marketing firm. He ended with "Have a good trip," which felt like an olive branch given our recent history. Update 3. 6 months later, Jeremy and I returned from Portugal refreshed and with a new perspective. The distance from daily stresses and family drama gave us space to envision the life we wanted to build together. We came back determined to establish clear boundaries with my family while remaining open to positive changes. In the months since our return, those boundaries have been tested several times. My parents initially respected our space, limiting communication to occasional texts and short phone calls. But as time passed, their old patterns began to resurface in subtle ways. My mother started making comments about how we should visit more often because Harry missed us, despite Harry rarely initiating contact himself. My father suggested we consider moving closer to them as they weren't getting any younger and might need help, overlooking the fact that Harry still lived with them. These moments required consistent reinforcement of our boundaries. I made it clear that while we valued family relationships, our decisions would be based on what worked for our marriage and careers, not on family expectations or Harry's preferences. The most significant change has been in Harry's situation. The marketing job he mentioned in his text didn't work out. He quit after 3 weeks, claiming the environment wasn't creative enough for his talents. However, somewhat surprisingly, he did continue with therapy. According to my aunt, his therapist had been blunt about the ways his parents' enabling had contributed to his lack of independence. This reality check seemed to spark something in Harry. He found a part-time job at a local community college teaching photography classes and moved into a small apartment with a roommate. While he was still receiving some financial support from our parents, he was taking steps toward self-sufficiency that I hadn't seen before. My relationship with my parents has evolved into something I describe as cautiously cordial. We talk more frequently now, and they make more effort to ask about my work and my life with Jeremy. They accepted our invitation to dinner at our apartment last month, the first time they'd visited since we got married. The evening was somewhat stiff but peaceful, with everyone making an effort to stay on neutral topics. As for the family celebration of our marriage that my mother had suggested, we eventually agreed to a small dinner at a restaurant, with strict parameters. Jeremy and I selected the venue, the date, and the guest list. We made it clear that if anyone tried to make the event about Harry or bring up old grievances, we would leave immediately. The dinner was last weekend, and to my surprise, it went relatively smoothly. My parents gave a brief toast acknowledging our marriage and wishing us happiness. Harry brought a colleague from the community college as his date and managed to engage in normal conversation throughout the evening. There were a few awkward moments, particularly when distant relatives asked why they hadn't been invited to the wedding, but overall, it felt like progress. Jeremy and I have been discussing our future plans, including the possibility of buying a house next year. We've been looking at neighborhoods about an hour away from my parents, close enough for occasional visits but far enough to maintain our independence. We've also started talking about having children in the next few years, which has led to conversations about what kind of relationship we want our future kids to have with my parents and Harry. I've been clear with my parents that if we do have children, I won't allow the same patterns of favoritism that shaped my childhood. Any grandchildren will be treated equally, regardless of their personalities, interests, or perceived potential. My parents seemed taken aback by this directness but didn't argue, which I consider progress. Harry has been making efforts to rebuild our relationship, though progress is slow. He sent a housewarming gift when Jeremy and I moved to a larger apartment, a framed photograph he had taken of the beach near where we got engaged. It was a thoughtful gesture that acknowledged our relationship in a way he rarely had before. Last week, I met Harry for coffee without Jeremy or our parents present, the first time we'd done this in over a year. The conversation was somewhat stilted, but he mentioned that his therapist had encouraged him to take responsibility for his reactions rather than blaming others for his feelings. He acknowledged, in a roundabout way, that his behavior after my wedding had been inappropriate. It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was movement in the right direction. I'm not sure what the future holds for my family relationships. There are moments when old patterns emerge and I question whether real change is possible. But there are also glimmers of growth that give me hope. My parents are making efforts to treat me as an adult with my own life rather than as an extension of their family system. Harry is taking small steps toward independence and self-awareness. Meanwhile, Jeremy and I continue building our life together. We've established new traditions and connections that have nothing to do with my family history or dynamics. His parents have become important figures in my life, providing the kind of unconditional support I never experienced growing up. We've created a strong circle of friends who know and accept us as we are. The wedding that caused so much drama turned out to be a turning point in more ways than I expected. By refusing to postpone our plans for Harry's nebulous potential, we not only claimed our right to move forward with our lives but also disrupted unhealthy family patterns that had persisted for decades. The fallout was painful, but it forced conversations and changes that might never have happened otherwise. I still maintain firm boundaries with my family, and I probably always will. Some wounds don't fully heal, and some patterns are too deeply ingrained to completely disappear. But I've found a balance that works for now: limited contact on my terms, clear expectations, and immediate consequences for boundary violations. Jeremy and I celebrated our first anniversary last month with a weekend trip to the same coastal town where we had our mini honeymoon. Sitting on the beach watching the sunset, I reflected on everything that had happened since that dinner when my parents asked me to put my life on hold for Harry. Despite the drama and pain, I couldn't regret our decision. By choosing each other and our future together, we had set a precedent for all the decisions that would follow.